therapists, but we are excellent educators. And I want you to know that we have a website, NAMIMinnesota.org. And it's important if you're looking for us to put in Minnesota, because there is a state chapter in all 50 states, and we do have a NAMI national office in Washington, D.C. So if you're looking for us, because we hope you'll look for other classes as well as support groups and other information, you want to use NAMIMN.org. And we have lots of different classes, classes for families, classes for professionals, classes for community members. I would guess besides your role as township clerks and township staff, you probably also belong to faith communities, you probably belong to service clubs, and we have speakers bureaus and many other classes that you can use in your personal life as well as in your work life for the townships. I also have given you my email on this slide, and you might want to copy it down, especially if you would like to get a hold of me to ask questions, because tonight, kudos to you for joining me at 8 o'clock at night, but you may have questions for family information that you need or for a neighbor or friend. So take down my email, and if I can't answer your question, I'd be happy to put you in touch with someone who can. So we are in St. Paul, but my address is my initial K and then king@NAMIMN.org. Tonight's topic is minding your mental health post-COVID-19, and we're using post. We're still, in the middle of it. Things change weekly, have been changing monthly, but what we're going to talk about tonight is not about mental illness. We're really going to talk about what you can do personally or help others in your family or help those that you serve in your job, or I'm sure you have other work responsibilities, perhaps another job besides your township responsibilities, where you can assist your employees that are struggling, because COVID has been a catastrophic stressor and all of us have been affected. So we want you to learn some tools tonight in our hour together so that you know where you can turn to during this really, really stressful time. And it's been going on for a long time. We're almost in the 16 months of this, and it's not just COVID, it's economic issues. It's issues with racial inequities. George Floyd died 2 miles from my house in Minneapolis. So there are many, many things going on that have come to a head. Politics, and we had an election last November. Just lots of things that are hard. So we're going to learn 3 things tonight to help you mind your mental health. One is talk just briefly about the impact of COVID on everyone's mental health. I can't think of a parent who hasn't been affected, because sometimes we think school's on and then school's not on. We think that childcare is going to work today, and then an infection happens and childcare is closed for a period of time. So there's been a lot of pivoting. Each year the dictionaries choose a word of the year. So I really thought at the end of 2020 that the word would be pivot. I feel like it's just one big pivot. And, they were a little bit, I would say, predictable by using the word pandemic as the word of the year. But I think pivot describes really how it's been for us for about 1.5 years. The second part is where we're going to spend a little more time, steps that you can do personally to promote good mental health for yourself and your family, and how to manage expectations as we start to return to the workplace. Some of you never left the workplace if you're an essential worker. Want to know, when is it time to get some help? When is it more than we can handle ourselves? Because we're all, not 20 years old. We're a little bit older than that, most of us. And so we've learned some strategies over life to cope with stress. So we turn to our inner strength, we turn to our faith, we turn to our friends, we turn to our family for support. But sometimes it gets greater than that, and we need to reach out perhaps to a healthcare provider, like our family practice doctor or a nurse practitioner. Or maybe we've had a therapy relationship in the past that we've used someone for marriage counseling. Maybe we reach out again, if we're struggling. I'm going to briefly give you some emergency resources for suicide prevention, but we have classes on suicide prevention at NAMI, and I encourage you to take one of those. So first of all, I'm not even sure you have paper and pencil near you. Some of you take your notes on maybe a laptop or on a tablet. But if you can, you think about some of the things that you've struggled with in the last 15 months. Maybe you've had some sleep issues, pretty common during this time. Maybe you felt some anxiety. Now, I don't mean, a diagnosable illness like anxiety disorder. I mean, a little bit anxious about things. Maybe you've had difference in energy level. You're normal. Maybe it's been different for you and you've noticed it or family has brought it to your attention. So if you would, just write down a few of the things that you maybe have struggled with during COVID and during these economic times and during these political times. And as we go through this presentation, maybe take one or two things that you learn and think about possibly using those and trying them and to see if that they can help you with some of the stress you're experiencing. So mental health, it's a state of well-being. It's where we realize our own abilities. We usually can cope with, the normal stresses of life, and there are many in our society. We're able to work productively, and work can be raising children, work can be volunteering in retirement or volunteering in your active work life, and also being able to contribute to the community. And the thing about mental illnesses, last time I took high school biology was a long time ago, but our brain is the control center for our heartbeat. Our brain is our control center for breathing, and our brain controls our thinking, our feeling, our thoughts, and it also helps us with our relationships and our skills of daily living. So I consider my brain to be the master computer board. So it's good to know just a few basics about mental illness, but again, that's not our main topic tonight. First of all, it's pretty common. 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 5 children under 18 live with a mental illness in a given year. That's 20% of our population. And about 1 in 25 are really severe illnesses, because illnesses are on continuums. You can have mild diabetes, moderate diabetes, really severe. You can have mild heart disease, moderate heart disease, really severe. Well, mental illnesses are the same. You can have mild schizophrenia, moderate schizophrenia, really severe schizophrenia. So remember, it's on a continuum, because the media makes you think everything's really, really severe. And that's not true. The majority of people are just living a life. I'm a family member. I'm from LeSueur, Minnesota. That's where I grew up. Lots of townships around there. And, I was born to a mother who already lived with mental illness. Now, despite living to be 82, my mom had to manage bipolar disorder since she was 18 and in college. And my mom and dad owned a restaurant in LeSueur. My mom was a librarian in LeSueur. So my mom lived a life. She raised 2 children, but she also lived with pretty severe bipolar disorder. So the most common of the mental illnesses are anxiety disorders. They're about 3 times more common than major depression. So it's good to know something about anxiety disorders. You can take another class sometime for that, but it's really early onset. Anxiety disorders, the average age of onset is 11. So half the people are going to develop anxiety in their lifetime do so by age 11, and half are after age 11. And in general, mental illnesses are a young person's onset. So this 20% that manages a mental illness in any given year, 50% of those folks developed it by age 14, and it raises the figure to 75% by age 24. That just leaves 25% of our population that might develop a mental health condition after age 24, young person's onset. So it's really important to try to learn some basics about mental illness. Some other examples of mental illness: PTSD, that stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. Eating disorders are a mental illness. The most common eating disorder is binge eating, but you maybe have heard of anorexia, or maybe you've heard of bulimia. There's borderline personality disorder, and many others as well. Schizophrenia can be a very serious illness, but it's not very common. As a matter of fact, it's anywhere from 0.8 to 1% of the population in a given year. Not very common. And when you have a mental illness, it often is associated with other co-occurring disorders. Things like substance use disorder, things like diabetes, things like MS, heart surgery. So, you certainly, if you have open heart surgery where they crack your chest, you're at really high risk for major depression. So again, take a class. We offer many, and they're much longer, to learn some basics about mental illness. So what we've been experiencing during this pandemic, catastrophic stressor. Things are uncertain. They're still uncertain. Also, we worry that we're going to develop COVID, even if we're fully vaccinated. We're worried that loved ones, older adults still make up most of the deaths with COVID-19. We're worried about our kids that aren't vaccinated yet that are under age 12. And if you're an essential worker and have been for all this time, you're certainly worried as well. It's been very isolating. I tell people I'm in extrovert prison, right? I am so extroverted. I mean, my preference is to be with strangers in a crowded room and meet all of them. That should tell you how extroverted I am. But it's hard. We're pretty careful in our family, and we've been, not traveling. We haven't even been traveling much by car, outside of our area where we live. And some people have lost jobs. I came originally from the hospitality industry. So people in hotels and airlines and restaurants, they took a big hit during COVID. Some of that's coming back, but many people are paycheck to paycheck anyway. And so this has caused a great deal of trouble. The other thing is that some extra money that was available for people that were laid off or unemployed, that extra money, which has helped people meet their bills like rent and mortgages and things like that, has now mostly gone away. And in September, some of that last money ended. And then also just think about the losses that we've had. And, a loss of someone who's young and someone who's our age or, in their 30s or 40s is a little bit different. It's one thing to have a sign in your yard that says proud graduate of Washburn High School. And it's another thing to walk the stage for your diploma. And, people certainly have gotten married during this time and maybe postponed a reception to a later time. But, many of us, if we have our wedding ceremony, we'd really like to have our 100 friends and family, at that event. Now, I should tell you, I think you're probably all familiar with the chat, but as we move along, I'm going to ask you for ideas too, some of the things that you've done and some of the categories we're going to talk about to reduce stress. And so if you don't mind using the chat, perhaps I can get a little bit help from Leslie too to kind of monitor the chat because you have good ideas too to share, and you can put those in the chat. So what have we been experiencing? Well, those of you that have young children in the family under 18, or you have grandchildren that you're trying to help, it's hard to work at the same time and help them with their technology, help them with school, with the bus driver shortage. It's been parents having to do transportation and things like that. It's really been difficult. And some of you may have young people in your life that are on individualized education programs. They're called IEPs. And those are young people that need additional support at schools. It might be someone who has a reading specialist that works with them. It might be someone who regularly sees the school counselor. And so if someone has an IEP program, it's really hard if you're a parent, first of all, a parent who's not a teacher by trade, but then also your child has some special needs that need to be supported. So that's been hard as well. And you may very well have had to be distanced for many of these months from someone who's older in your family, and still possibly. Not just because, as you know, you can be fully vaccinated, and luckily not too many people have breakthrough illness from after they're fully vaccinated, but some people have, and a few have been hospitalized. I think touch is hard. I typically am masking still, even outdoors, and not hugging people, and so that's hard. And I don't know about you, but I have a little bit of Zoom fatigue. I've taught 500 Zoom classes approximately since last April of 2020. And some of those are 6-hour classes. And so I'd say I'm a little zoomed out. I hope I'm still peppy enough. And working from home, for some people, it's been terrific. For someone like me who gets my energy from others, it's hard. And I have to say, when I teach, many people don't use their cameras. And I get my energy from the room. I'm a teacher and I teach typically in front of people, but that hasn't been the case for this last 16 months. And for some people, there's kind of this hopelessness, this helplessness, especially people who've already experienced trauma. So, examples of trauma, someone who's gone through sexual assault, someone who's maybe served in the military, someone who has just gone through Hurricane Ida, in the Gulf area. Someone who has lost their farm to foreclosure. There's lots of traumas out there, including domestic abuse, right? And it's not just the adults perhaps that are involved in that domestic abuse, but it's the children in the corners as well. So, death of loved ones, not just during COVID, but just the natural losing grandparents and parents and things like that, that's traumatic. Going through a divorce, that's traumatic. And definitely COVID has been a trauma. So I think people, are finding it hard to think about going back to work. Many corporations have postponed that. A lot of them were planning on doing that in September, but now you've probably seen some of the large companies around the country, they postponed it till January. Some organizations have said, some people are going to come back, but some of you can remain working at home, for example. And it's hard to balance this life harmony. I'm a night person, and I have to tell you, I find myself checking work emails at night. I really didn't do that before, even though I could. I have a device that I could do that at home, but I didn't do it, and now I do. And I have to be very careful to make sure that, I separate my work from my personal life, because they're all happening in the same building. And then also, you liked working from home, and now you're being maybe called back in, and you don't feel as safe as you would like to feel. And so there's that. And then also, we just haven't all processed all of what's happened. I suppose some people have gone for a little bit of therapy, or maybe they've used their employee assistance programs and things like that. But many of us just haven't thought it through. We just kind of plowed ahead, one step in front of the other, trying to make this work and hoping it ends soon. Another way to say this is that we're all in the same storm, different boats. Some days I feel like I'm in a canoe trying to paddle up the Mississippi. And some days, I feel like I'm on a yacht. Things are going pretty well. Nobody's sick in my family with COVID or anything else. So I feel pretty good. But you don't need me to tell you that there has been disparities about who's infected. The largest immigrant group in Minnesota is Mexican American. And we have a large Somalian population. Actually, it's the largest in the United States, but we have more Mexican Americans than Somalians. We have a large Hmong population, and we also have a Karen community that's from Myanmar, used to be called Burma. We have the largest Tibetan population in the United States. So we really have, a wide variety of people of ethnic backgrounds. We also have a lot of Native people, and Native people, Blacks, and others have been much, much more hit by this virus. And so those kind of statistics I think you've seen. And the same is true for deaths as well as infections. And there's disparities in who's vaccinated. You probably have followed in your own townships and your own counties. They keep track of vaccinations by county in Minnesota. And so you can see sometimes where kind of the hot spots are. And then of course, I guess it came to the forefront. Asian Americans have been discriminated against for a long, long time, but you probably remember the deaths that occurred in Atlanta of Asian American women primarily. And so lots of that escalated because people were using terms like the Wuhan flu, right? We really don't know where COVID started. There's some speculation and there's some research into it, but we still don't really formally know. And so consequently, there's been a great deal of stress on the Asian American community and including violence. And then of course, I told you how close I lived to where Mr. Floyd died. The Minneapolis Police Department is my police department. So, that's been stressful. It's also been hard for people like myself to figure out how does a white, privileged white woman fit into, this future that needs to change. And so I've been struggling with that for a long period of time too. Mr. Floyd died in May of last year, and so we're over a year. And on our ballot in Minneapolis, we are going to be talking about the issue of policing in our ballot on this November in Minneapolis. So, all of these traumatic stressors of COVID-19, adults are struggling with their mental health, and there's been an increase. March 2020 is kind of the start of COVID. And so really a large increase just in those first few months until July 2020. Lots of folks have struggled. Doesn't mean you have a diagnosed mental illness, but you may be struggling with anxiety or sleep or having some physical symptoms. And more women than men are struggling. Don't know why, but you have seen research, I think, that shows that women are doing more of the education portion and more women have dropped out of the workforce because they're trying to help children. So that's not totally true. Men do that as well, but more women have than men. And Suicide rates in Minnesota, if you can believe this is great news. The last figures are from 2020, and our suicide rate for one of the first times in 20 years has gone down nationwide and also gone down in Minnesota. That's great news. And we're pleasantly surprised because it was a very stressful year in 2020. However, for young adults, suicide ideation has gone up. So in that age category, it actually has gone up. But for the general all ages population in 2020, suicide deaths went down both in Minnesota and in the United States. There's been a huge increase of use of alcohol and drugs during this time. You've probably been following the opioid figures. And then also, alcohol sales have skyrocketed, just skyrocketed. And that's not just being replaced with home purchases. It means just overall alcohol sales, including what would have been consumed in restaurants and bars, and then also home use. And if you already live with a mental illness, this really has compounded issues for people that are already managing a mental illness. Now, when you're at stress at high levels for long periods of time, we secrete stress hormones. An example of a stress hormone is cortisol. And cortisol is good. We have that fight, flight, or freeze that's built into our DNA. It helps protect us. It's been from the beginning of man. However, when you keep secreting hormones like this, like cortisol, like this for 16 months at high levels, it affects your physical health and your mental health. So I have to say that I'm more irritable than I've ever been. I would say my family would report that. And doesn't mean I live with a mental illness, but it does mean that I'm much more short with people. I don't have as much patience. And I have to keep using the mantra, grace and space, grace and space. Sometimes have to say it out loud to myself. I'm in front of the mirror, or I sometimes have to repeat it to myself and count to 20 when I'm irritated on something that doesn't happen fast enough. For some people, it comes out as some physical symptoms. Headaches aren't uncommon during stressful times. Changes in sleep, certainly. For some people, it comes out as anger. Some people, it's a change in energy. But when you have high stress levels for long periods of time, that can be a tipping point for, a predisposition to diabetes, or if you have a predisposition to high blood pressure. This kind of stress can be a tipping point and finally make these things diagnosable. So now we're going to talk about the kind of step 2 of the objectives for tonight, and that is things you can do for better health. And again, if you have ideas, I'd love it if you put them in the chat. So let's get started. So some of you are employers. I know some of your jobs in township are not full-time jobs, but you may be employers in your other part of your life or in the township itself, or you may supervise volunteers. And so, we need to foster the kind of workplace or the kind of volunteer place where there's understanding and compassion. And it's good to know a few basic stress symptoms and make sure that people know kind of how to identify them and then where they should turn if they need some help. If you have employee assistance programs where you work, not everyone does, but if you do, it's really good to make sure everybody knows what that phone number is. And I have to explain, an employee assistance program, NAMI is small. We have about 35 employees, but we have that as a benefit and it's free. And the package that we have allows us to have 3 counseling sessions, and they've been on telehealth, on computer because of COVID, but you get to see a counselor. No one at your employer knows that you used it. They just get a count at the end of the year of how many people use the employee assistance plan, not who used it. You can use it for marriage counseling. You can use it for your own personal health. You could use it to get some coaching of how to communicate more effectively with the adolescents in your family. Those counseling sessions can be used as you wish. And you also might have also at work wellness activities and benefits that also are provided by your employer. But again, those 3 sessions that NAMI offers in our employee assistance program, there's no copay, there's no out-of-pocket expense, they're free. And employee assistance programs are one of the most underutilized benefits in benefit packages. They are talked about at rollout time of benefits, but just often, they need to be talked about again and reminded so that people consider using them. And usually the company has contracted with an outside vendor to provide those employee assistance benefits. And then accommodations. If someone has been hospitalized for back issues, you certainly may have to make some accommodations at work for someone. Perhaps they get a stool where they prop up their feet to relieve some pressure on their back. Well, the same thing might be true for a mental health issue. Maybe someone needs to work part-time for a while until their brain gets back to where it was before. When you have a break from reality, which is psychosis, it takes about 1.5 years before your brain gets back to where it was, right? Psychosis, break from reality. And so just because you were hospitalized, the average length of stay in a mental health unit is 3 nights, but it takes our brains about 1.5 years. So someone may need some accommodations, and mental health is covered under the American Disabilities Act. So if you want a good presentation from NAMI, we do have Good Mental Health in the Workplace as a program. So we certainly could do that for you sometime if you're interested in knowing more about what you can do as an employer. And you can also just give NAMI's website, NAMI Minnesota's website, to people, and they'll find classes and support groups and things like that. And most of them are free. Now, it's important how we talk about mental illness. And it's also important that we treat it like we treat any other illnesses. So maybe when people come back to work, maybe you have plexiglass holders on the wall where you put some mental health information. We have brochures at NAMI that you can use. We just charge the cost of printing. You could have those in your workplace or at your town hall or any place else that you deem important in your city or township. But you send cards, you take food, you do all the things that you would do if somebody had cancer or somebody had a new baby or someone was recovering from a stroke. And it's important to learn the basics. We don't teach mental health robustly in 10th grade health class. We didn't when I was a kid, and we don't today. So it's important to learn what you can, because again, these are young person onset illnesses. So briefly, I'm just going to ask you to think about some words that people use for mental illness. And I'll start you out. Crazy is one of them. So my comment is, what are some of those other bad terms that people use to talk about mental illness? If you can put those in the chat, that would be great. I've got the chat up, so operators standing by. There's, a button on your toolbar that says chat. Yep, I'm getting some, thank you. So psycho, nuts, cuckoo, crazy, yeah. And let's not spend a lot of time on it, it's so negative. But I just want to ask you to do the same thing for cancer. So give me all the slang terms that you would use for someone in your family that lives with cancer. Give me the crazy, nuts, cuckoo, psycho, nutcase. Give me all those words for somebody who has skin cancer or some other cancer. Da, 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 da. Don't see anything in the chat. Aren't those people brave and courageous and all those sorts of things? At least that's what you see in the obituaries. And so my point is, we don't really have terms for that. And I have to say that, I'm purposely doing this to shock you. Okay, I'm going to say, let's say you have someone in your family with stage 4 skin cancer. It's very serious. Stage 4, you could die of stage 4 skin cancer. So let's call your family member rotted flesh. You probably wouldn't do that, would you? But isn't that kind of comparable to crazy, nuts, cuckoo, psycho? Why would somebody get help for a mental illness if they thought they're going to be called a name? Why would they want to get a diagnosis in case that they're going to get name calling? See, I think you understand what I'm saying. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that, we make mental illness a culture where it's okay to get help, and we want to publicize it, including improving people's wellness. Our head is connected to the rest of our body. In the healthcare system, we talk about integrated healthcare, but we tend to treat from the neck up and we tend to treat from the neck down. And we're integrated, but we need to talk about some of the things that are helpful to reduce stress, which certainly could be a triggering factor for someone who has a predisposition for mental illness. We don't know what causes mental illness. The theory is you're born with a predisposition, something puts it in motion, and a catastrophic stressor like COVID-19 could put it in motion. So, what kind of programs can you have at a workplace or in your volunteer organization? You can have walking clubs. Maybe everybody walks at a lunch break. Outside, bad weather, maybe inside. You have a wellness board where you put information, including mental health information. There's an app called the Calm app. It is a subscriber app, but at NAMI, NAMI's paid for the subscription, and we all have been given the password. And many of my colleagues really like it. They use it as an app before they go to bed to help them relax. So it's one. There are others out there. So if you have some other apps that you like that are helpful for stress, put them in the chat and say for everyone, and that way people can see them as well. Seasonal affective disorder is diagnosable. I think we all in Minnesota have some winter blues. I know I crave carbohydrates in the winter, but just know that not everybody has seasonal affective disorder, and that's diagnosable, and it really is debilitating. But, some people I know don't live with seasonal affective disorder, but they do use a light that is a spectrum light, and you can buy those at Walgreens or online. And they do seem to help people with their mood in the winter because we have less daylight. We are at greater risk for SAD disorder in Minnesota because of the latitude that we're at. We get less sunlight than Texas or Florida or, Mexico or South America. Quiet room, it's hard at home. If you live in a 2-bedroom apartment, there's not a lot of quiet space if you have multiple family members. But at a workplace, if you have some space you can carve out for a quiet room. We do have one at NAMI. We haven't been in the office for a long time, but it has like a bubbler fountain that you can plug in. It has a rheostat light. It's a place that you can make a phone call, like a doctor's appointment, because many of us work in queues, so you can't make a private phone call very easily. There are some exercise pieces in that room, like those balls that you can sit on, if you need to burn a little energy. So, those are all things that could be in a quiet room. For some people, prayer is part of their day. And so that quiet room could be used for prayers as well. Now, work-life harmony. I've lived long enough that I know my best part of the day. If I'm working on something really hard, I'm a late afternoon person. If I'm working on budgets or I'm working on, a large project, writing curriculum, things like that. I can be peppy at 7 a.m. I used to run large hotels and resorts, 400 rooms or more. Used to run a retirement community. I can be peppy pouring coffee at 7 o'clock in the morning and greeting guests. But my best time of day for complicated work is the afternoon and evening. So if you're the boss, you can structure your day a little bit better. But if you're in an office, maybe you can try to make your tasks at the part of the day that you do best. And then give yourself some grace and space again. Maybe there are things that you got done much faster before COVID, and now things take a little longer time. So, let your supervisor know if you need a little more time for an assignment, or ask if someone else can help you. Good, I guess, coworker etiquette is, if you have some free time, is to reach out to a coworker and say, I'm caught up today. Is there anything I can help you with? Do you need some help planning that conference 4 months from now? Because I have a little free time next week. That's good coworker etiquette. And then control what you can. I think many of us have had to disengage a little bit from social media during these times, the political times, as well as the racial times, as well as the COVID times. And, you can have feed on your phone all day long with news, but maybe you just tell yourself, these are the 2 times a day that I'm going to listen to public radio, or I'm going to read the newspaper, I'm going to watch TV news. And you can control washing your hands, you can control mask wearing, you can control staying away from work if you have symptoms of COVID or a cold or flu or things like that. So just know that try best you can, it's hard, best you can to control what you can, because there's some things that aren't in our control. Now, the acronym FACE, F-A-C-E, it stands for focus on what's in your control. The A is acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. And it's hard, I tend to spend a lot of time in my head, but take a little bit of quiet time to also acknowledge your feelings. I just lost a coworker. She was waiting for a heart transplant and didn't come. She was 35 years old, 2 little kids. And so on days where I'm thinking to myself, and I'm grousing about this, my coworker just lost their life and they had little kids. Now, that doesn't mean I negate my feelings. It's just I try to put it in perspective a little bit. And then try to come back into your body. And a way to do that is through breathing. That's a way to come back into your body and feel your body. And then the E of FACE is engage in what you're doing. So if that acronym helps you, that's what FACE stands for. Focus, acknowledge, come back into your body, and engage in what you're doing. Now, practice new routines, because guess what? We just went back to school, or our kids just went back to school, I should say. And so guess what? I'm wearing kind of a work shirt tonight. I could be wearing, a sweatshirt. I don't think you can even tell because you can barely see anything more than neck up. Actually, I have work pants on too. I could be wearing sweatpants. You can't see what I'm wearing, but for me, psychologically, it prepares me that I'm working, right? And I am working tonight. And then also maybe, if you haven't been in a car commuting for a while, in Minneapolis, it's quite a shock. I went from no traffic if I had to stop in the office to now it's back to regular traffic in Minneapolis. It takes me, from where I live, it takes me 30 minutes to go 8 miles. That's how it was before COVID, and that's how it is again. So people are going back to work, there's more traffic. And then also, think about your boundaries. Not everybody is going to mask. Not everybody is going to keep that 6 feet, but you have to kind of think through a visualization as well as what you're going to say to people. When people say, well, come and visit, and this is someone where I'd have to get on a plane, I just say, I'm a little more conservative. We're not traveling right now. Just have prepared what you need to say. And, happy thoughts do not change a mental health condition, but I do try to have a gratitude. You can have a gratitude journal. I was given a jar a couple Christmases ago with slips of paper in it to write, one thing I'm grateful for every day. And I have to say, I wasn't very good at doing it every day. But, the person who gave it to me asked me like in June, how's that going? And I'm like, well, it was going good, but it hasn't been going good for a couple months. And I started up again. And just recently I found the jar. I started pulling out the slips. And it's interesting because I'm still grateful for lots of things I put on the slips 2 years ago. So do whatever works for you for gratitude. Maybe before you get out of bed, you say out loud, or you say to yourself what you're grateful for before you get out of bed. Now, it's really important to have consistent sleep times. So that's part of your time management. Most of us as adults need 8 hours of sleep. We don't often get it. Sometimes we're at 7 hours, but it is good to try to have 8 hours if you can. And 8 hours also for young people, a little bit more for some young people as well. And, sometimes for my lunch break, I'll go outside in the yard, and I live in city, it's proper. I'll go out in the yard and I'll take my shoes off because it's warm right now. I take off my shoes, take some deep breaths, and have my feet planted in the grass barefoot, deadhead a few flowers. Because I'm an extrovert, I wave like a middle-aged beauty queen at cars. Not very many people wave back, but that's my break. Now I still get a bite to eat, but it's important for me to connect with nature a little bit. So sometimes I do that at my break to get away from the computer screen and sitting. Now, nourishment. I'm going to tell you that right now, if you have something to drink, now would be a good time to drink your water. And I don't know if you can see this, but I have some cucumbers in my water. I was in the hotel business a long time. At a coffee breaks, we'd always have infused water. We put berries like strawberries, raspberries in a big tank of water. And guess what? The water tasted better. And I was not drinking enough water. So I thought, well, why can't I have infused water? So every morning I take a pitcher, fill it with tap water, dump some cucumbers or lemons or berries, whatever I have. And I've been pretty good about drinking a whole pitcher all day long. And I didn't do that before. So, take some water right now. As far as healthy snacks, we like nuts at our house, but I have to say we buy kind of big bags because it's cheaper. And I was just taking scoops of cashews, and there's a lot of calories in that. Nuts are good for you, certainly better than some of the other alternatives like Cheetos. But I figured out the only way I could take a better portion was to pre-bag. So now I take a portion of whatever a portion is considered for those nuts, and I put it into like a small container. That way I grab that instead of the whole bag. Other things that farmers markets have been great, and some of you maybe have gardens. And so I'm better if I cut up things as soon as I bring them home. So I like raw cauliflower. I do like carrots. But if I chop them up, then I'm more likely to eat them. If I keep them whole, sometimes they get old and they get composted, which that's not the goal. So that's a couple pointers that I would give you. And then emotional eating. I have to tell you that I eat when I'm happy and want to celebrate. I eat when I'm sad. I eat when I'm bored, and I am only 20 feet from the refrigerator right now. So, it's been hard, I have to say. I've been lucky. I personally haven't gained any weight during this, but it's only because I really have been walking every day for the last 3 years. I was getting ready for the El Camino in Spain, and I walked, 150 miles. So I was getting in shape. So I just continued doing that right into COVID. So that's probably the difference between me and 10 pounds. So if you have other ideas that relate to nourishment or sleep, please share those. Now, sleep, there's a really good app. It's free. The Veterans Affairs has an insomnia coach app. So if you go to the Veterans Affairs and put in an insomnia coach app, it's free, and it was developed for veterans that have PTSD, but it's helpful for the general population. Also, it's good to be in a room that has a lower temperature when you're sleeping. And so it should be about 70 degrees and winter or summer. And the rooms that we sleep in our house have the best window shades. I'd like to have great window shades on every room in the house, but they're expensive. But you really want good ones in the rooms that you sleep. And obviously, if you're using a blue light device like a laptop or like a Kindle or a phone or a television, you want to really stop using those about 2 hours before you go to bed. Now, some of the newer devices allow you to change the blue light setting, but research says that's not enough. So if you really want to have good sleep, you have to do a number of things, including eliminating some of that blue light. It's important to have a routine of when you go to bed and how you go to bed. So I try to go to bed about the same time every night, and I try to get up even on weekends at the same time, if possible. And I also try to have a routine. Like part of my routine is flossing and brushing my teeth. Part of my routine is, if it's trash night, is taking the trash out. If I had children, part of my routine would be to read a picture book to kids. So it's important to have a routine, and you all have one, but that routine helps you prepare for bed. Now, you notice this doesn't say exercise, it says move. And movement can be anything. And it also could be cleaning the house. It also doesn't have to be 60 minutes at one time. It can be broken up into segments during the day. Do something that you'll do. The best exercise is the one you'll do. That's a quote. The best exercise or the best movement is the one that you will do. And so I'm bored with walking the neighborhood. And people have said, well, why don't you walk at a park or something? Because if I have to get in a car and drive someplace, I'll blow it off. So for me, it's just easier to get on the shoes and go out the back door. So yes, I'm bored. And yes, I go different directions and I try to mix it up. But, after 3 years of walking every day, I'm a little bored with the scenery. I also purposely don't wear earbuds, but you can, because I want to try to connect with nature a little bit since I'm inside so much now. And so that's why I don't. I want to hear the birds, I want to see things. And so I'm not listening to a book on tape, or I'm not listening to music. But if it works for you, do it. So quiet place, pretty hard to do when there's 4 people living in a small space. We're lucky at our house, we have 2 floors. So it's okay to separate yourself a little bit. But maybe if you're a parent with small children, maybe you lock the bathroom door, provided there's another adult who can watch the child on the other side. But maybe that's all you get is a chance to sit in the bathtub and read 2 pages of a book, and that's it. So you just do the best you can. For most people to get some quiet time, it's usually going outside. And I do Tai Chi, and I've been doing it for 15 years every Saturday. My class met all winter outside. I had snow pants. I bought adult snow pants, and we did Tai Chi outside, and it worked. So, get the right clothing and you can probably do it. I'm going to just talk to you and actually demonstrate a breathing exercise. One way to reduce stress and to bring your mind focused to your body is to breathe. So I call it the 4-6. So the way you start is you first exhale. So you exhale completely through your mouth, making a whooshing sound. Then you close your mouth and you inhale quietly through your nose to the count of 4. And then you repeat it again. You exhale through your mouth completely, making a whooshing sound to the count of 6. Then you inhale by closing your mouth and inhale through your nose to the count of 4. And do it as much as you can, time-wise, until you start feeling a little more relaxed. So let me just demonstrate it, and then maybe you'll remember it by the 4-6. Okay, so I'm going to first exhale. So if that helps you remember it, 4-6. The other thing is that when you were in grade school, you probably made a turkey at Thanksgiving by tracing your hand. Another way to remember to breathe is every time you wash your hands, you're looking at your hands. And I'm washing them a lot during COVID. So you wash your hands, right? And as you trace your hand, you breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. So the hand is just a reminder to breathe. And when I'm washing my hands and I'm looking at my hands, that's my reminder. So that's another thing that might help. For journaling, if you want a suggestion, there's a woman named Natalie Goldberg. You can look her up. She teaches journaling classes. You know, there's lots of people probably out there, and you may have very well ideas as well of a gratitude journal that you like, and you can put it in the chat function so other people do it. But I also, I don't keep a journal personally, but I do keep a notebook by my bed. So for example, one night I was thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't send the evaluation form to my speaking engagement for tomorrow. And I thought, oh, I'll forget to do that. And I didn't want to run downstairs. I was already in bed. So I wrote it down in that little notebook. So I knew it was down there that next morning I'd be reminded to send that evaluation form. So I just want you to know that that's helpful for me. Maybe you have some other things that work for you. Our faith is important. Everyone's got some different backgrounds, but culture is often tied to faith. So some of our recent refugees that have come to Minnesota or immigrants, you know, they get a lot of support from their culture, and that's good. And sometimes that faith and culture are intertwined, not always, but sometimes. But it's some people, when they're not doing well, reach out to their spiritual leader. You know, they start maybe by talking to a pastor or talking to a rabbi, and that's good. And then that person will certainly forward you on to a health professional if it's more than they can handle in their role as a pastor, rabbi, etc. So, you know, people do well when they have a higher power. You probably know people who've gone through chemical dependency programs, maybe using the 12-step program. And I have to say that, you know, that is helpful for people as well. Now, I thought we were in for, you know, a short, you know, temporary situation that maybe would last 6 months or so, this COVID thing, but it's really a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so grace and space and just one day at a time. I think the people in AA are onto something with their one day at a time. Now, sometimes there's things you can't handle yourself. So if you have some issues with hopelessness, energy levels are different. You can't screen out some of the stimuli. You're having some tardiness or absences, or people that work for you are having trouble. You're having trouble concentrating, memory issues. It might be time to get into your health practitioner. So I just want to encourage you to do so. Just start with whoever you go to for your general health care. And they might do a depression screening. They might ask you some questions and maybe refer you to a specialist. You know, if we have cancer, we get referred to an oncologist. If there's a mental health condition, maybe we get referred to a psychiatrist who has an internship and a residency in mental health. Just like I don't expect my general practitioner to do the chemotherapy, the radiation, or the surgery for my breast cancer, right? So if something's not working well with your brain, wouldn't we want to see someone who specializes in the brain? Now, it may not be a mental health issue per se, it could be something else. That's why it's important to get into your doctor, because there are medications that have side effects that look like depression. There's medications that have side effects that look like anxiety. Steroids are an example of that. Sometimes people take steroids for inflammation. So it's just good to get help. Now, you know, if we have feelings of numbness, anxiety, or fear, you know, I don't mean numbness like can't feel your fingers or your toes. I mean numbness, you're not feeling your feelings. Someone who already has diabetes or has high blood pressure and it's getting worse, that would be a time to get in to see your health practitioner. If someone's starting to use again and they've been sober for a long time, you know, something's amiss or they wouldn't be using again. So it starts a discussion going, right? And you know, you can stop again. If people are having sleep issues, Maybe it's something like sleep apnea, but then you should get into the doctor's side, you get a sleep study, but maybe it's something related to stress. And, if you have a change in appetite, eating too much or too little, that's a change. If you have a difference in your sleep, too much or too little, that's a change for you. So it's important to get into your health practitioner. That's more than you can talk out with a friend. Use the EAP program. Maybe you've had a therapist in the past. You could reconnect with that therapist that you've used in the past. You can let your supervisor or manager or volunteer leader know that you're struggling. Maybe you need to take a break for a while. You also should use every part of your support system. During these times, if somebody offers to take your kids to the zoo with their kids, say, yes, please. If somebody offers to help you with a meal, yes, please. If somebody offers to mow your lawn because you're struggling getting out there and the grass is growing too high, yes, please. And it's really hard. We're proud people, and we don't often want to do that, but it really is important. When people offer, they would do it for any other health issue, including this. Again, people have different reactions at different times. So this isn't just as an employer, this is in your family. People in your family all react a little differently to the kind of stress that we're having. But if you're in a work situation, maybe you do some Zoom check-ins. Maybe you try to gather outside while the weather's good and have coffee outside 6 feet apart, right? You check in a little more maybe than you did before. How can I help you? Just avoid that sort of like, we're all in the same boat. When somebody shares with you that they're struggling, don't dismiss it by saying, oh, we're all in the same situation. Better to say, I hear you, I'm listening. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I would really recommend that we use it in that proportion. Sometimes I have 2 mouths and 1 ear. I'm an extrovert, but really, if we listen twice as much as we talk, that will help. And have your resources ready. Now, I'm not going to talk about suicide because we're almost done, except to say, take a suicide prevention class from us. We have a class called QPR, stands for Question, Persuade, Refer, and it's an hour and a half. It's free. You can take it online with a teacher like myself, and it's important to learn some basics about suicide. I'm a suicide loss survivor. I lost my uncle to suicide, and I lost my best friend from childhood when we were 50 to suicide. And so I'm called a suicide loss survivor. So it's important to know some basics about that. Now, not everyone who lives with mental illness has suicidal thoughts. Not everyone who dies by suicide lives with a mental health condition. But if you do live with a mental illness, you're at greater risk for suicide than the general population. There's some phone numbers that would be good for you to have in your phone, so that I want you to know that every county, 87 counties in Minnesota, have a county mental health crisis number. And you can use one number. It's *27. Oh, I made a typo. It's 274747. My apologies. Whoops. It's 274747. And it's * crisis. So my apologies. It's 274747. So 24/7, if you're on a cell phone, you'll be connected to your county mental health crisis number. They're 24/7. It's good to have that in your phone. Again, I have a typo. It's *274747. Also, there's a national text number, 741741. That's also 24/7. It's national. But put Minnesota in the message. So that's another way to connect yourself with crisis services. There's also a national mental health crisis hotline for suicide as well as a mental health crisis. It's a 1-800 number, 273-8255. And in about a year, that number will become a 3-digit number, just like 911 works in the whole United States to get a hold of the police or the sheriff's department. There'll be a 3-digit number soon instead of the 1-800. But until then, put 1-800-273-8255 in your phone. And if you want landline numbers for the crisis numbers in all the counties, you can get those on the county website. So if you need Candy Ojai crisis number, go to the Candy Ojai County website or go to the Blue Earth County website. So grace and space, control what you can, think the best people. Now, here's my contact information again, and I'm also going to put in the chat our evaluation form. If you have time, and I know you have a busy agenda, but if you have time to fill out our evaluation form, you can copy this link And I'd be grateful if you filled out the evaluation form. You probably have one maybe for the whole conference, but this one's just for this session. So I'm going to stay on for a few minutes. You may need to leave, and I'm sure probably Leslie's going to close out our breakout also. But if you have any comments or questions, I see that someone put something very personal in the chat, and I really appreciate it when people talk about their mental health conditions, because, you know, it's common. And when people tell their stories, then other people feel welcome to also tell their stories. We have family classes, and they're starting this fall. So if you're a family member of someone who lives with mental illness, there's an 8-week class. It's free. I've taught it for 15 years. It's really good. So if you're a family member, or you know someone who's a family member, tell them about our family classes, and they're on our website, and you can take them virtually and some are in person. So I'm delighted, that you invited me to speak tonight. I'm delighted that you work all hours of the day. You township people rock. And you can reach me at my initial K and then king@namimn.org. And I'd be happy to put you in touch with resources. If I can't help you, I'll find someone who can.